settlers consisting of 115 people, with John White as their leader, was rapidly approaching the shores of America on a large cargo ship. John stared forward confidently. He was determined to establish a new territory for his country and build a house for his family. Besides experienced sailors, travelers, and builders on board the ship, there was John White's wife and his daughter with her husband. They all sailed to an island called Roanoke. This piece of land was a fort and, in the future, would be the beginning of modern North Carolina. However, John White didn't know yet at what price it would be done. The group leader was confident in his abilities because this was not the first attempt to establish a colony there. The first 2 times the British tried to build a fort post on the island ended with a series of failures. A lack of food supplies and other problems prevented colonization. But not everything was so bad. The previous settlers learned that there were precious metals somewhere on the island, and anyone who found them would become wealthy. Everything was supposed to work out this time. John White was sure of it and was prepared for the new attempt. So at last, the ship docked to the shore. The whole crew got to the ground. Everyone was excited about new opportunities on the new land, so they quickly started building a new home. John White supervised the construction, explored the island, and established contacts with the natives. The settlers spent every day working hard, building houses, making fires, and cooking food. And despite the difficult conditions, the team settled in, and John White's daughter gave birth to a daughter. However, soon, the standards of living began to deteriorate. Cold weather was approaching, and the supplies of food and building materials were quickly running out. Remembering the experience of the previous settlers, John White decided not to bring the situation to a critical point, so he went to England to get provisions in advance. He calculated that he could return before people ran out of supplies, so he left his wife, daughter, and granddaughter in Roanoke. He set off on a month-long journey back to England with a small team. Always keeping in mind that his family was waiting for him on the island, he came to the residence of Queen Elizabeth I immediately upon arrival to ask for a new cargo of food. However, while he was sailing to England, some events happened that interfered with his plans. His country came into conflict with Spain. The Queen ordered the return of all ships sailing for the New World. She decided to gather a fleet to fight the opponent. The shipment of provisions to the island where John White's family lived was cancelled. It's not known how the group leader reacted to these events, but he probably went crazy because of his inability to fix anything. Using all his connections and influence, John White managed to get a ship with provisions. However, it happened only 3 years after his return to England. He understood that the settler supplies had most likely run out by this time, and he had no idea what had happened to his family. With a new team, he quickly set off for the New World. A few months later, he saw the familiar outlines of the shore. The closer the ship got to the land, the more John White's excitement grew. He looked through a spyglass, but saw no signs of life on the island. When he came ashore, he immediately ran towards the settlement. He found houses they had built together destroyed. All trunks were looted. There was an ominous silence, and no people. The colony seemed to have disappeared. John White realized something bad had happened to his people and his family. Perhaps they went somewhere in search of food supplies, or maybe someone or something made them run away. England started several investigations to find out what had happened, but didn't get any answers. The only clue John White found was the word Croatoan scratched into a wooden post. For centuries, historians have been trying to unravel the disappearance of the colony. They put forward different versions. Some believed that the local tribes had attacked the colony, and others thought the settlers had gone inland in search of food and had just gotten lost. There was also a version that local tribes had put a curse on people and they had faced some phantom sinister force. However, the first version seemed the most realistic because Croatoan meant the name of the island where the tribes lived. Perhaps they waited until John White left the settlement and attacked the British. Of course, this version was also tested. People visited the island but found no traces of settlers there, and locals said they hadn't seen the disappeared colony. According to another version, the settlers tried to return to England after waiting for John White for some time. They were unsure whether the leader would come back, so they decided not to wait for the supplies to finish and went to England on the ships of other settlers sailing there. Who knows, maybe they got into a storm and disappeared at sea. Perhaps they met Spaniards with whom the British had a conflict. But all these are guesses that have no evidence. We would have never known what happened to the Roanoke Colony if, in 2012, Elizabethan-era researchers hadn't discovered the mark of an unknown fort drawn in invisible ink on John White's map. That place was only 50 miles from Roanoke. After discovering the new clue, archaeologists traveled to North Carolina to find the secret fort. They arrived at the place and found many fragments of English pottery lying on the ground. Among them, there were pots and jars for storing and cooking food. There was also a Native American village not far from this location. There's a version that the colony split up. One group went to the island of Croatoan to wait for John White. Before that, they scratched this word on a tree as a hint. The second group went deep into the country and settled in that secret place marked on the map. In the future, researchers may find definite answers to all these questions. But until that happens, the disappearance of the Roanoke Colony is still one of the most famous mysteries in American history. Thick fog is rising over the ocean as the sun is slowly sinking towards the horizon. It's hard to see further away than a few dozen feet, but that's enough to notice a hulking, skeletal shape in the distance. As your ship approaches the figure, your heart beats faster, and then you make out the details of another vessel, abandoned by the looks of it. Ghost ships do exist, and their mysteries aren't always solved. Take MV Hoyita, for example. It was a wooden vessel built in 1931 as a luxury yacht. It had served well to various people over 20 years before it was bought by a Samoan sailor and became a merchant ship. In 1955, though, Hoyita's service came to an abrupt and mysterious end. On October 3rd, it set sail for another trading voyage that should have taken no more than 48 hours. Delays happen in the sea, so when Hoyita didn't arrive on October 5th as scheduled, there was little worry yet. But then it failed to come on the following day too. There was no distress signal or any other sign of Hoyita's presence anywhere between its departure and arrival points. A search and rescue party was dispatched to find the ship, and for 6 days, they were scouting the area of nearly 100,000 square miles. On October 12th, the mission returned to the base empty-handed. Hoyita vanished without a trace. It was only a month later that another merchant ship, Tuvalu, noticed the missing vessel far away from its route, drifting in the open sea and listing heavily. The sailors boarded the ship and found that all of its crew and passengers, 25 people total, were missing, along with all the cargo the vessel had been carrying. The radio was tuned to the International Distress Channel, meaning that the crew had been trying to ask for help, but they couldn't reach anyone because the radio cable had been damaged, limiting the range to 2 miles. The lifeboats were missing as well, indicating that people on board must have left the ship. Unfortunately, they seem to have taken the logbook with them, leaving the rescue team clueless as to what had happened. Even today, the mystery of MV Hoyita hasn't been solved yet. No one knows where the crew and passengers had gone and what had caused them to leave. SV Carol A. Deering wasn't a ghost ship in the usual sense of the word. There are no sightings of it in the open sea. Instead, it was found on the shore, but the circumstances of it running aground are a puzzle shrouded in mystery. Carol A. Deering was built in 1919 in Maine, and it was a large vessel made for commercial voyages. Unfortunately, despite its large cost of construction, it had only served for a year before its last trip. July 19, 1920. The ship was traveling from Puerto Rico to Rio de Janeiro via Newport News to deliver a cargo of coal. It was almost halfway to the final destination when the captain fell seriously ill, and the crew turned back to drop him and his son off and replace the captain. The voyage went without incident, but when it came to Barbados in December to resupply, there were strange moods among the crew. The first mate didn't seem to be happy with the new captain. no one paid much attention to it back then, when they probably should have. The last sighting of Carol A. Deering at sea was on January 28, 1921, when a lightship noticed it off the coast of North Carolina. There was some commotion on the quarterdeck of the ship, where the crew were normally not allowed. Then, another vessel sighted it, but there was already no one on the decks. On January 31st, the merchant ship was found hard aground in the Diamond Shoals, a site notorious for numerous shipwrecks that had been occupying there for centuries. When the search and rescue party boarded the ship, they found it abandoned, the log and personal belongings of the crew gone, along with the 2 lifeboats. There is still no answer to what happened on board of Carol A. Deering that January, although the most popular version was mutiny. Maybe we'll never find out the truth though. SS Bechimo is perhaps one of the most notable ghost ships in history. This large cargo steamer was built in 1914 in Sweden and plodded its way dutifully over 16 years, trading provisions for pelts with native tribes of Alaska and Canada. But then, on October 1st, 1931, Bechimo got caught in pack ice. At first, it seemed the crew would be able to wait it out and continue on their route because the ship broke free in a couple of days. But in less than a week, it became caught again, this time for good. In another week, a rescue party was sent to fetch 22 of the Bechimo's crew, while another 15 remained behind to wait through the winter if necessary and get the ship back. But a month later, after a powerful blizzard struck their camp, the sailors went out of their shelters only to find the ship gone. Luckily, a few days later, a native hunter told them Bechimo hadn't been lost yet. He'd seen it about 45 miles from where they had been stationed. They managed to track it down, but decided the ship wouldn't survive the winter. So they took the most valuable cargo from its hold and abandoned it. They were wrong though. SS Bechimo did survive that winter, and many more that followed. When the ice broke, it sailed away on its own, drifting listlessly along the shores of Canada and Alaska. There were numerous sightings of the ghost ship, sometimes adrift in the open sea, and at other times stuck in the pack ice again. People attempted to board and salvage it, but weather conditions or lack of equipment always prevented them. SS Bechimo was last sighted by native Alaskans in 1969, 38 years after its abandonment. What became of it later remains unknown. The story of SS Orang Medan is one of the most puzzling and harrowing ghost ship stories of the 20th century. No one even knows for sure if the ship even existed in the first place. It wasn't recorded in Lloyd's Shipping, the International Register of Ships, which makes it either a tall tale or a vessel that avoided being officially recognized for some shady reasons. In any case, the accounts as to what happened to the Medan vary. According to most reports, it was carrying some unknown cargo in the Indonesian waters when a distress call was received by another ship in the vicinity. The officer on duty heard an SOS message, but its contents are different depending on the accounts. The message did not repeat, and the crew of Medan didn't answer to any attempts to contact it back. The ship that received the distress call hurried to the rescue, but they only reached the vessel the following day, when it was already drifting and slightly listing. When the rescuers boarded the ship, they found that none of the crew had survived. However, one lifeboat was missing, which implied that there was at least one crew member who managed to escape. What happened to the rest of the people on board remains a mystery to this day. Still, there are no hard facts about this story, so we might never find out whether SS Orang Medan was actually a ship and not a thing of fiction. SV Zabrina was a 3-mast sailing barge built in 1873 for river trade ships in South America. She served for well over 4 decades, proving to be a sturdy and reliable ship. It was later transferred to Europe, where it continued serving its purpose well. But then, in October 1917, Zabrina set sail on a regular voyage only to be found ashore several days later. Mysteriously, although the ship was perfectly intact, the entire crew of 5 and the captain were gone. There is no direct evidence or hard facts as to what really happened that day. The most convincing theory is that the crew were washed away from the deck because of an underwater explosion. And then the ship sailed ahead without them. But the truth, as always, remains unknown.
You go for a hike in the steep mountains of Mammoth Lakes, California. The terrain is rugged and difficult. The icy snow makes it harder to walk. Halfway along the hike, you spot something out of the ordinary. From a distance, you spot scattered stuff lying on the rocky ground. You walk a little closer to have a clearer look and see what appears to be the remains of an airplane. It turns out that the debris belonged to record-breaking pilot Steve Fossett. Authorities had been looking for him for almost a year. No one could find him and explain what caused his plane to crash. It seemed like such an easy flight for an experienced pilot. So what could have happened to him? You see, years before this tragic event, Fossett was attempting a much riskier feat. He was trying to be the first pilot to fly around the world solo in a hot air balloon. Now, can you imagine spending 2 weeks in a tiny container just to break a world record? If you're wondering, here's what you'll need to fly around the globe: a sound navigation system, a wealthy sponsor, and tireless endurance. Even though balloons are the oldest flying vehicle, no one until Fossett managed to fly around the world with them, and it sure wasn't a breeze. It's day one of Fossett's second attempt to fly around the world in a balloon. The year is 1997, and an anxious crowd gathers in St. Louis, waiting for Fossett's takeoff. The pilot walks into the stadium with a big smile. He certainly doesn't look the part of an adventurer trying to achieve the impossible. But this is the trip of his life. To prepare, he trained to acclimatize himself to an altitude of 12,000 feet. The conditions are harsh. He's flying in an unpressurized cabin and in between the clouds. It seems unlikely he'll make it all the way, but there he goes. The balloon launches into the air. The crowd beneath is cheering and waving him goodbye. The wind of about 5 knots allows the balloon to launch. On the first night, one of his heaters breaks. It is freezing outside the cabin, but he gets through the night. Fossett's secret weapon is the world's first balloon autopilot. It gets lonely up there, and the constant need to focus makes one very soon tired. At night, he turns on the autopilot to get some sleep. It fires the burners in a computer-programmed sequence and keeps the balloon on the flight path. Fossett needs to wake up and operate the burners to change the altitude. After 3 days, a first victory. He has flown across the Atlantic Ocean. He flies solo, but a team accompanies him on the ground. They communicate mostly through email sent via satellite. At the end of the first week, the Mission Control Center receives an alarming email from Fossett. Dark clouds are mounting on the horizon. It looks like the weather is turning against him. He can see the thunderstorm from the balloon, but there is no way to predict how strong it is. Fossett is determined to fly through the clouds despite the risks. He is flying at 1,000 feet above the ground with no visibility. Somehow, he makes it through. His flight continues through Libya, Iran, and India. It looks like nothing will stop him now, but he is already exhausted. He is uncertain how much longer he can keep going. Inside the balloon, the meals are small rations, and he uses a bucket as a toilet. Unfortunately, he has lost a lot of fuel while crossing the Atlantic. Halfway through India, the balloon crashes into a tree. He flew an astounding 9,600 miles from St. Louis until his landing spot. Steve didn't achieve his goal, but he won't give up. To finally be successful, Fossett needs to change his strategy. His new plan is to fly over the southern hemisphere. It was the first time anyone would ever try that. His idea is simple. In the southern part of the globe, he would fly mostly over water. This would help him fly faster, as he would only need flight permission from 5 countries along the way. If you were on the ground as Fossett flew by, maybe you wondered what that flying object in the sky was. As he flew over Cape Town in South Africa, over 50 people reported seeing strange flying objects. Sorry to disappoint your fantasy folks, but it was just Steve Fossett and his balloon. His first attempt to fly around the world through the southern hemisphere almost worked out. He got lucky. When he reached Australia, he caught a jet stream that helped him speed up to about 115 knots. That's 3 times the speed of a gazelle. Morale was high as Fossett had already broken his distance record by flying over 13,500 miles. Under his feet, the beautiful Australian landscape is filled with deserts and dry lakes. He crossed the Australian coast at 8:22 p.m. local time, and his next expected landfall was in Chile, over 7,500 miles away. But again, a huge thunderstorm got in his way. After entering the storm, the balloon showed how fragile it was. The lightning and fierce winds tore the balloon apart. This time, he wouldn't make it through. He fell into the ocean as the balloon caught fire. A rescue team waited until morning to go look for Fossett. A Hercules aircraft rescued him from open waters. In his sixth attempt, Fossett made it around the world in a hot air balloon. The Spirit of Freedom balloon landed in Queensland, Australia, after a 2-week flight across the globe. He flew at speeds of over 200 miles per hour and journeyed over 19,263 miles. Fossett had done it. He was the first solo pilot to cross the world in a balloon. However, he didn't stop there. Soon after breaking this world record, he wanted to do the same on a different vehicle. He convinced Richard Branson, the owner of Virgin Atlantic, to fund a single jet-powered aircraft, later called the Virgin Atlantic Global Flyer. On the 8th of February 2005, the Global Flyer took off. It set out to circumnavigate the Tropic of Cancer, an incredible length of around 23,000 miles. Out of luck, or sheer ingenuity, Fossett broke yet another world record. He overcame a major fuel loss early on in the flight and made it all the way back to Salina in Kansas, where he originally departed from. Did this story make you want to hop on a hot air balloon? Fossett was the expert in aerial adventures and extreme conditions. This is why his disappearance in the Sierra Nevada mountains was full of mystery. What could have happened to take down such an experienced pilot? On the 3rd of September 2007, Fossett took off from a Nevada ranch with this single-engine plane named Super Decathlon. It was a simple, leisurely day flight that took a dark turn. Fossett never made it back to the ranch. A search and rescue team was sent to find the pilot and his plane, but they returned empty-handed. It wasn't until a year later that a hiker found some of Fossett's belongings near Mammoth Lakes. Then an aerial search located the remains of Fossett's two-seater at an elevation of 10,000 feet. The mystery was solved with the help of advanced technology. In the world's first hexagonal wind tunnel facility, experts recreated the weather conditions of the day of Fossett's flight. They were trying to understand if the downdrafts from the Sierra Nevada mountains could have brought his plane to the ground. With the help of a smaller plane replica, they made a disturbing discovery. That day, visibility was normal, but the wind currents swelled the plane like a leaf. A sudden downdraft most likely disoriented Fossett and made him lose control of the aircraft, causing him to crash directly into the mountains. The plane's engine wasn't powerful enough to overcome the wind forcing it into the ground. It turns out it was entirely out of Fossett's control. The discovery of the debris brought closure to this unfortunate case. The coldest part of our planet, Antarctica, keeps surprising us. Take a look at this waterfall named Blood Falls. Reddish water falls from the white ice. Scientists concluded that the color is related to iron. The water coming from the glacier oxidizes and rusts when it's exposed to oxygen, and the red color occurs. Step on Mount Gandic. It lays eggs. Well, maybe not real eggs, but the stones certainly look like dinosaur eggs. That's why the mountain got its fame. Let's call them stone eggs, formed in one part of the mountain over 500 million years ago. Interestingly, this phenomenon repeats once every 30 years. Eggs come out in various sizes and shades. The stones appear on the surface of the cliff. A study made in the area has revealed that the composition of the stones of the cliff isn't similar to other parts of the mountain. Here, calcareous rocks rule. They're more prone to erosion. They ripen off day by day. It took 3 decades for the stones to get to the egg shape. Yet, it's still a mystery how these rock formations can be so perfectly spherical and smooth. According to scientists, every stone egg has an organic core. They're made of shells, plant remains, fish teeth, and skeletons. Maybe this has something to do with it. Gulu village is close to the stone eggs. Locals believe that these eggs are sacred. Villagers associate it with good fortune. In fact, nearly every family has one of these eggs in their house. Unfortunately, there are only about 70 eggs left, so if you want to see them, you gotta hurry up. The Richat structure is a circular geological phenomenon in the Sahara Desert near Mauritania. It's made out of rocks in layers, and these layers look very much like rings. No wonder the unique structure even got NASA's attention. Up from the sky, the geological feature seems to be swirling and spinning. Scientists are still not sure how these rings got there. Some say it was an asteroid impact. Many others believe that it was a natural geological process. To them, the Richat structure is an uplifted and eroded dome. Geologists often classify it as a domed anticline. The scientists discovered that the rocks at the center are older than the ring-shaped outer rocks, so it seems like the stones have been eroded to flat rock layers. Anyway, there's no valid explanation for this phenomenon, and the 28-mile-long mystery of the Sahara is still to be solved. Number 4 is Rapa Nui, or Isla de Pascua, but I bet you know it as Easter Island. Yeah, it's got 3 names. It was discovered by Jacob Roggeveen, who actually never intended to look for that island. He just casually landed there one Sunday. That's where the name comes from. Jacob was supposed to find Terra Australis. Disclaimer, it's not Australia. This one never existed and was nothing but a hypothetical continent. Plus, he wanted to peek at Davis Land, which was believed to have once been seen by Edward Davis, the pirate, not Edward Davis, the saxophone player. Jacob failed at that too, though nobody ever saw that island except for the pirate Davis. Jacob may have failed to discover some lands he wanted to, but he discovered Easter Island instead. This is an island and special territory of Chile, located in the southeastern Pacific Ocean. It's on my list because nearly 1,000 stone statues called moai were found there. They were created by the Rapa Nui people. Nearly all statues represent gigantic heads, but there are also a small number of figures kneeling with their hands over their stomachs. Each statue represented chiefs or other important members of Easter Island society. To curve those statues, the locals used volcanic stones that were softened. Our next stop is the gateway to the underworld. Nah, don't worry. This is just how people labeled Darvaza gas crater in Turkmenistan. This giant natural gas crater has been there for 5 decades. This crater is continuously burning gases. The president of the country wants experts to find a way to extinguish this continuous firing pit. This site was created by people accidentally in 1971 while working on a natural gas project. Ever since then, the flames have been on, and it's become a tourist attraction. Mysterious constructions are sometimes built in our era, too. We don't have to go millions of years ago to long-gone civilizations. Edward Leedskallen single-handedly built a structure called Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida. He didn't use any large machinery. He carved and sculpted more than 1,100 tons of coral rock in 28 years until 1951. It's a mystery how he managed to do it all by himself. Leedskallen sculpted the sedimentary rock into different objects, such as walls, tables, chairs, a fountain, and a sundial. There's of course a legend behind this mystery too. He was inspired to build the structure after being abandoned by his fiancée on their wedding day. Uh-oh, runaway bride. Well, he wanted to prove his love to her and the world, so he wanted to do something extraordinary. Well, he definitely nailed it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the mystery of the Namibian fairy circles. There are millions of circular patches in hundreds of miles, ranging from 10 to 65 feet in diameter. They're called fairy circles because they look like a fairy or an otherworldly creature made them. These are essentially oval-shaped soil surrounded by grass. There are a lot of local beliefs surrounding the creator of these marks, yet science says something else. Biologists and mathematicians have been puzzled by the mystery of the Namibian fairy circles for decades. There is more than one theory to explain this phenomenon. Here's one popular theory. The water is limited in the desert, so plants compete to reach the water. Some plants expand and thrive into a patch, but smaller plants nearby cannot get the necessary water to live. In the end, some vegetation disappears, and the remaining ones stay at the patch's edges. That's why they form such regular distant gaps. What if I tell you that there is a hill in Leh City, India, where instead of rolling downwards, things roll uphill? It's an optical illusion. The road looks like it's a sloping hill because of its surrounding landscapes, yet the road actually goes down. These kinds of hills are called magnetic hills or gravity hills. Scientific explanations vary. The most common theory says that the hill has such a strong magnetic force that it can pull cars in the vicinity. Now, how about seeing some flaming rocks? Yanartash spread over an area of over 3 square miles. The place is located on a rocky mountain in southwest Turkey near the town of Çağrıoğlu. Yanartash got its name from its appearance. It literally means flaming stone. The rocks have been flaming for at least 2,500 years, and they'll probably keep burning for the coming decades. The mountain where the rocks are is an inactive volcano, so it's full of tiny fumaroles that release gases such as methane. The gas ignites when it comes into contact with oxygen and creates the flaming effect. And by the way, back in the day, sailors used the flames as a natural lighthouse, as it's really close to the sea. Today, it's more of a tourist attraction, though. Hikers love it too. Now, walk on this frozen Lake Abraham in Canada. In winter, the frozen water gets filled with ice bubbles. It looks magical, but these white orbs aren't that safe. They consist of flammable methane gas. Ew. Beauty can be misleading. The next one is from Racetrack, Death Valley, USA. There is a dry lake bed with moving rocks. Now, these odd rocks look as if they've been pushed or dragged by someone or something. They leave both a trail and a mystery behind. The force behind all this is now understood. Surprise! It's the wind and some ice. Scientists say the wind pushes the rocks during brief windows when the soil is covered with ice. Now, I can't help.
Have you ever wondered why mountains seem so still and silent? Well, prepare to be amazed because these majestic landforms have some hidden talents. You see, mountains are actually quite the performers. They have their own unique songs and dance routines. What does it mean and how does it work? Well, let's see. Get ready for a chilling revelation. Mount Everest has a secret nighttime symphony, and this mysterious music will send shivers down your spine. When darkness falls over the Himalayas, a strange, eerie chorus echoes through the glaciers surrounding the majestic peak. A team of researchers embarked on a quest to unravel the mystery. Led by the glaciologist Evgeny Podolsky, they trekked through the freezing temperatures of the Nepalese Himalayas. Their goal? To uncover the source of these hair-raising noises. The team was amazed by the incredible size and beauty of Mount Everest. During the day, the weather was nice and they could work comfortably. However, when night came, it became extremely cold, reaching temperatures as low as -5 degrees Fahrenheit. At that moment, something interesting happened. The ice on the mountain started to break apart and make loud booming sounds that echoed through the valley. To solve the mystery, the team used advanced technology that is typically used to measure earthquakes. They placed sensors on the surface of the glacier and listened to the vibrations it created. They also looked at information about temperature and wind. By comparing all of this data, they made a very important and exciting discovery. The culprit behind this frozen orchestra? It's the sudden decrease in temperature. The icy surface of the glacier is very sensitive to these changes, causing it to crack and split with loud booming noises. This discovery helps scientists understand how glaciers behave in a world where climate change is becoming more pronounced. This adventure is really important because it gives scientists who study glaciers and the climate in faraway places like the Himalayas very valuable information. The melting of glaciers in that area is happening really fast, and that's a big problem. It's a serious threat to South Asia. Recent research shows that the glaciers have been melting 10 times faster in the past 40 years compared to the previous 700 years. But this isn't the only reason why mountains can make strange noises. Other mountains might also sing their own songs. For example, Mount Matterhorn. Guess what? Everything around us has its own special rhythm. Objects vibrate at certain frequencies because of their shape and what they're made of. You've probably seen it before with tuning forks and wine glasses. When they're hit with the right frequency, they start shaking and making sounds. But here's something cool. Even mountains have their own groove. They vibrate in their own unique way. Jeffrey Moore and his team of adventurous scientists wanted to find out if mountains can dance to their own music, just like bridges and tall buildings. They thought that the special shapes of mountains might make them vibrate at certain frequencies, which is called resonance. But testing this idea wasn't easy. Unlike buildings that engineers can shake or bridges that vehicles can drive over, mountains are massive and hard. It's hard to make them move on purpose. Not giving up, Moore and his team took on a big project. They wanted to study how the shaking of the earth affected the famous Matterhorn mountain. This incredible mountain is located on the border of Italy and Switzerland. It looks like a pyramid. It's really tall, reaching about 15,000 feet high. It has 4 sides facing north, south, east, and west. With the help of helicopters, the scientists put special devices called seismometers in specific places on the mountain. One was placed at the very top and used solar power to work. It was as small as a coffee cup. Another seismometer was tucked beneath the floorboards of a cozy hut on the mountain, and a third one was placed at the base of the mountain to compare the measurements. Together, they were the tiny observers that kept recording the movements of the mountain all the time. And they finally detected it. Even though the mountain's movements are incredibly small, scientists discovered that the Matterhorn gently sways back and forth about once every 2 seconds. What's truly surprising is that the top of the mountain moves up to 14 times more than its base. The Eiffel Tower kinda does the same thing. This giant iron structure is a pro at handling windy days, and when a storm blows through, it's not afraid to show off its swaying skills. It's like the tower is saying, "Hey wind, bring it on." But the reason behind the mountain's movement isn't just wind, as it may seem. So, why do mountains do that? Why do they dance and make a humming sound? Are they having a party that we're not invited to? Well, it's all because of something called seismic energy. When earthquakes happen in different parts of the world, their energy travels through the earth and causes the mountains to vibrate. The oceans also join in this mountain music. When waves move across the ocean floor, they create vibrations called microseisms. It's like the Earth's own heartbeat, felt all around the world. And guess what? The frequency of these vibrations matches the way the Matterhorn sways. It's like the mountain and the oceans are chilling together. So the next time you see a mountain, remember that it's not just standing still. It's actually part of a global symphony created by the Earth itself. This research helps us learn how earthquakes can affect steep mountains that are prone to landslides and avalanches. It also gives us a new way to appreciate mountains like the Matterhorn. They have their own hidden songs, swaying and vibrating to a mysterious melody deep within the earth. But there's one more pretty cool thing about the mountains. They don't just talk themselves. They may also influence the way we talk. Turns out, languages spoken in high-altitude areas have special sounds that you won't hear elsewhere. After studying 567 languages, linguists found that 92 of them use a special kind of sound called ejectives. These sounds are made by pushing air out forcefully from the back of the throat. This creates bursts of speech that give these languages their distinctiveness. Scientists were really surprised by this connection. These sounds, like a strong K and Ka, are not common in English or European languages. But some indigenous languages in North America and the area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea have them. What's even more puzzling is that Tibetan languages, spoken in mountains, don't use ejectives. Linguists are curious to unravel this mystery and learn more about how mountains and language are connected. So, why do some languages spoken in the mountains have special sounds? Well, it's a bit of a mystery. Researchers have some cool ideas. One idea is that these sounds might help people keep their throats from getting dry when they talk in the dry air of the mountains. Another idea is that the lower air pressure up there makes it easier to make these sounds, but scientists are still figuring out the real reason. Although some experts are not entirely convinced by this explanation. They say that while geography can influence language, there are other reasons why languages might be similar. Like, borrowing words from nearby languages, or being close to each other. But this research has still given us some amazing insights. Mountains not only shape the way our world looks, but they also shape the way we talk. So, the next time you're exploring a mountainous area, listen carefully to the local language. You might hear unique sounds and words that are influenced by the mountains themselves. It's like nature is sharing its own special secrets through the language of the people who live there. And remember that the mountains themselves also have a voice, and they're speaking to us in their own special way. Scientists are still on an exciting adventure to uncover their secrets. So let's see what are some cool things they'll find out in the future. Stay tuned.
A loaded Boeing 777 bound for China vanishes into thin air. An eerie monolith suddenly appears in the middle of Utah's desert, only to disappear just as mysteriously. And one of Hollywood's most famous cars, James Bond's iconic Aston Martin DB5, has been missing since 1997. But one burning question remains. How can such massive things just disappear without a trace? Buckle up, because we're about to dive into these wild mysteries and explore what might be hiding right under our noses. The 18.5-inch high bust of Queen Nefertiti is housed in the Neues Museum in Berlin. Apparently, she was like the Beyoncé of ancient Egypt. Absolutely flawless, with high cheekbones, a slender nose, and that mysterious smile, all carved in limestone. But wait, where's her eyeball? Or rather, her iris? Yep, her left eye is just an empty socket staring into eternity. But take a closer look at the iris of the right eye. That, my friend, is quartz. At first, the archaeologist who found it assumed that the crystal had fallen out, so the team tried their absolute best to get it back. But they couldn't find it anywhere, which opened up space for other mysterious theories about its disappearance. Specialists thought that maybe in real life, Nefertiti had some ancient eye infection or a rare disease. But it turns out, nah. This theory probably isn't right, because other statues of her show the left eyeball. So maybe the artist got lazy and only finished one eye, or they just abandoned their studio. I mean, who doesn't feel like ditching work sometimes, saying, "I quit"? Or maybe this bust was just a demo model for official portraits, showing future sculptors how to carve the internal structure of the eye. I know it's hard to believe that this beautiful bust was just a prop for an art class. After all, it is ranked as a masterpiece of craftsmanship. But this theory has some backing. The unpainted sides of the shoulders are listed as the second clue that this bust was meant to be a model. But was it really? Well, nobody can prove it. All we know is that when the bust was found, the eye was already missing, as if it never even had one. So the mystery is still very much alive. From one ancient queen to another, but more modern. Yep, I guess we can say that. I'm talking about Queen Victoria. More precisely, about her missing parliamentary mace, a symbol of authority that's been lost since 1891. Here's the scoop. The 5-foot-long staff, made of silver and topped with a thin overlay of gold, was securely locked away after a late-night assembly. But by the afternoon, it had vanished without a trace. The prime suspect was Thomas Jeffrey, an engineer who was seen leaving the Parliament House with a large, noisy package. Jeffrey claimed it was just scrap metal for his workshop. Then there's a theory about a builder using an open window to sneak in and open the case, though the fingerprints on the windowsill led nowhere. And let's not forget the prankster rumor. Apparently, someone might have borrowed the mace for a joke and forgotten where they had left it. Finally, there's this wild tale of a group of Melbourne ladies supposedly taking it and tossing it into the Maribyrnong River. Despite all the wild theories, the mace is still missing. We still don't know who took it or if any of those suspects were actually involved. But whoever grabbed it probably thought it was some kind of valuable treasure. In reality, it was almost worthless, costing Parliament less than £300. Sure, that's about $50,000 today, which is not bad at all. But what I'm saying is, if the suspect was trying to get rich, it would have been a lot easier and more profitable to take any silverware or plates from the speaker's room. In 2020, a shiny metal monolith suddenly appeared in the Utah desert, like a sci-fi prop that got lost. Standing about 9.8 feet tall, it looked like it was waiting for cosmic entities or a film crew to show up. But instead of that, the monolith took center stage in a real-life mystery. The monolith was found by a helicopter pilot doing an annual bighorn sheep count above a rugged area in the desert. Soon after, the monolith's eerie appearance grabbed the media's attention, sparking all sorts of wild theories. Most of them, of course, involved extraterrestrials. But my absolute favorite is that this piece was created by an avant-garde artist who's really into 2001: A Space Odyssey. While everyone was scratching their heads, a photographer reported seeing 4 guys come in, break the monolith apart, and make off with the pieces in a wheelbarrow. Yep, they literally rolled away with it. One of them even said, "Leave no trace," as if they were auditioning for a secret agent role. That means that while some were dreaming of interstellar visitors, the real action was probably much more down to earth. Still, the Utah monolith mystery remains unsolved. Nobody knows exactly who took it, and no one has seen it since. Yeah, that's right. Although people claim to have seen it being destroyed, one theory suggests that this strange piece might still be intact in the backyard of one of the suspects. The Florentine diamond is a pale yellow gem, weighing a whopping 137 carats. That's about the size of a small walnut, which makes it huge compared to the typical diamonds you find in jewelry stores. Unfortunately, this historical gem is missing, and its story sounds like it was ripped straight from an adventure novel. It all started in the 15th century with Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy. I mean, we think so because its origins are still disputed. Theory number 1 says that when Charles met his unfortunate end, he was wearing the diamond. Then, a peasant or a soldier allegedly saw the yellow rock and thought it was just glass, selling it at a very cheap price. Not a great deal, especially since if this diamond were auctioned today, it could be worth more than $20 million. Some people think that this story is just a tale, because the first historical reference to the diamond comes much later, in 1657, when French traveler Jean-Baptiste Tavernier described a large gem owned by Ferdinand II de' Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. So, that takes us to theory number 2. When the last Medici passed away, the Habsburg family put their hands on the gem, making it part of the Austrian crown jewels. When the empire collapsed, Emperor Charles I of Austria allegedly took the diamond with him into exile. In 1918, someone close to the imperial family decided to borrow the diamond, if you know what I mean, and took it to South America, along with other crown jewels. So, the Florentine diamond could have been part of a royal gem heist, but as a victim, I guess. Rumor has it that in the 20s, the diamond somehow made its way to the United States, received a bit of a makeover by being recut, and was sold off. But was it really? Well, no one knows. From priceless diamonds to cold Coke. Honestly, on a scorching summer day, a refreshing drink feels just as valuable. Next on our list is a mystery soda machine. This vintage gem popped up in Capitol Hill, Seattle, sometime in the late 90s. And let me tell you, it was like no other. People used to say that it had a bunch of mystery buttons that, instead of your usual Coke or Sprite, dispensed some pretty strange and elusive flavors. Imagine the fun of pressing a button and wondering if you'd get ginger ale, grape soda, or something bizarrely new. No one knew exactly who stocked the machine. Over time, locals spun legends that it was haunted or had a mind of its own. This mysterious Coke machine became so famous in Seattle that it had its own Facebook page with over 24,000 followers. Then, in June 2018, it vanished with a note saying, "Went for a walk." Theories flew about where the soda machine went, from the Space Needle to a secret life somewhere else. Unfortunately, despite a few faux sightings, the machine remains lost. If that's not the coolest, most enigmatic vending machine ever, I don't know what is. Let's suppose you're strolling along the beach in Hamamatsu City, Japan, soaking up the sun and listening to the waves, when, out of nowhere, you spot a 5-foot-wide metal sphere. Most people would probably freak out, thinking it's a spy balloon, a mysterious aircraft, or, I don't know, a Dragon Ball. This exact scenario happened to one guy last year. He probably thought it was just a weird beach ball, so he tried to push it. Naturally, it didn't move one bit. A month later, this giant metal ball was making headlines worldwide because no one had any clue where it came from. The local police, suspecting it might be dangerous, closed off the beach and got busy with X-rays. Eventually, once they realized it wasn't dangerous, the officials just decided to move the mysterious ball out of there. They said it would be stored for a certain period of time and then disposed of. But people are still scratching their heads about where it ended up. I mean, those words were pretty vague, and the authorities never exactly said what they did with it. I know we've been chatting about single items up to this point, but things are about to escalate. Over a dozen sculptures, murals, and installations have vanished in Baltimore, and nobody seems to have a clue why. Take The Guide, for example, a 15-foot-tall sculpture that stood proudly outside Baltimore City College for more than 30 years. One day in 2014, the city's art conservator shows up and, surprise, surprise, the sculpture is gone. But wait, how does a massive steel sculpture just disappear like that? Did no one see this happen? Well, apparently not. And this wasn't a one-off. Since 1992, 14 artworks have disappeared or been found in a sad state. Although some people have been investigating the case, so far, nobody has any idea what happened or where the works are. Maybe they were taken by some high-stakes art collectors, or perhaps someone thought they could use them as fancy garden gnomes. It's hard to think of anything more mysterious than an airplane disappearing without a trace. You have probably heard of Amelia Earhart, the groundbreaking American aviator who became a true legend. In 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean, making a daring trip from Canada to Northern Ireland. Then, in 1935, she was the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to the U.S. mainland, completing a dangerous 2,408-mile flight that had already claimed several lives. She also became the first female vice president of the National Aeronautic Association. Her list of records goes on. So let's just say she's got a bit obsessed with pushing boundaries. But her ultimate goal was to be the first woman to fly all the way around the world. So in 1937, she took off on this epic journey in a Lockheed Electra 10E. But things went horribly wrong. During a flight from Leh to Honolulu, communication problems and faulty tracking led to her disappearing over the Pacific Ocean. Despite tons of sea and air searches, neither she nor her plane was ever found, making it one of aviation's biggest mysteries. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is kind of like today's version of Amelia Earhart's missing plane. On March 2014, a Boeing 777 took off from Kuala Lumpur, heading for Beijing, but it never made it. It vanished from air traffic control screens, but military radar briefly picked it up when it strayed off course before disappearing completely. Picture a massive, high-tech search operation stretching from the South China Sea all the way to the Indian Ocean. What's really weird about this whole thing is that even with a huge search effort, both in the air and at sea, we still don't know exactly what happened. Theories range from the pilot intentionally crashing the plane and mechanical failure to an elaborate hijacking, but nothing concrete has turned up. The only thing we know is that the last confirmed signals from the plane pointed to a remote part of the Indian Ocean, and that's pretty much it. The next mode of transportation on our list became legendary thanks to the movies. There it is. It's James Bond's iconic Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger. This wasn't just any car. It was a superstar, complete with a hidden telephone, an ejector seat, tire shredders. It had more tricks up its sleeve than Bond himself. But on June 18, 1997, this famous DB5 vanished from a hangar in Florida. That's right, it just disappeared like a magic trick gone wrong. At that time, the car was owned by businessman and car collector Anthony Pugliese III and was worth a whopping $7 to $10 million. It wasn't the best disappearing act, though. Tire drag marks on the floor leading out of the hangar made investigators think the car was probably hauled out by its axles and loaded onto a flatbed truck. If that was the case, the thieves likely waited until after dark to make their move. Now, on to the theories. Some folks think it was shipped off to a secret lair, maybe a swanky palace in the Middle East. Others believe it might have been sunk into the ocean, Bond style. There's even a rumor that Pugliese himself hid the DB5 in a warehouse in New Jersey. Despite a six-figure reward and a detective hot on the case, the legendary car's whereabouts are still a mystery. The list of missing Hollywood props doesn't stop there, and Tony Stark might need to file a police report. In 2018, the original Iron Man suit worn by Robert Downey Jr. simply vanished from a warehouse in Los Angeles. That iconic red and gold suit from the 2008 Iron Man film, valued at $325,000, just poof, disappeared. You'd think if someone took it for the money, they'd grab more stuff from the prop storage, right? Come on, that place was full of objects from Hollywood. But nope, the suit was the only thing that disappeared. With no suspects in sight and no other items reported missing, this possible heist feels like it could have been pulled off by Thanos himself. You know, if he wasn't, well, fictional. The last item on our list is out of this world. And I mean quite literally. Back in the 70s, after Apollo 17, astronauts Eugene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt picked up a moon rock and decided to share a piece with the world. I mean, why not, right? So authorities chopped up the rock. Actually, there were 3 different sources and sent 270 pieces as gifts to different nations around the globe. Fast forward to today, and over half of these Goodwill moon rocks have vanished. Some of them simply disappeared, while others just got tossed in the trash. As strange as it might sound, Ireland's moon rock ended up in Dublin's garbage dump after a fire at an observatory. Joseph Guttheinz, a former NASA agent who became a moon rock detective, has been on a quest to recover those cosmic gifts. He even offered $10,000 for Malta's missing moon rock, but it still hasn't been found. Apparently, the moon rocks are like celestial treasures. So, if you've got a rogue moon rock hanging around, you might want to check if it's on Guttheinz's radar.